Welcome to the ScaleHQ podcast, your weekly injection of tips and insights into the secrets of scaling. I'm your host, Sean Steele, and I am obsessed with figuring out how to help founders just like you who are creating real value in the world to scale up so they can fulfill their potential. I do that each week by interviewing founders who successfully scaled, experts in all the areas of business that you need to master, interviews with founders who are still on the way up, and 10-minute tutorials and reflections from me based on my experiences in creating $100 million in revenue for 4 other companies over 8 years. So let's dive in and see what gems we can find together on this week's episode of the ScaleHQ podcast. G'day everybody and welcome back to the ScaleHQ podcast. This week you are just solo with me. Hopefully that's a good thing for you. Today we are going to dive into a transformative concept from my perspective that can actually just be a really great tool in your toolkit to enable your next growth phase. And that's actually called outcome-aligned pricing. This is a model that I often use with or explore with founders that I privately mentor or ones who I'm chairing an advisory board for, because quite often they're looking for ways to enable growth, ways to differentiate. They're looking for ways to build margin. All these things, of course, are really useful and valuable things to do. And there's not one way to do all those things. This is just one tool that you might find super interesting. And getting it right has absolutely transformed the fortunes of a whole bunch of businesses. And today I'm going to give you 4 examples, and then I'm going to walk you through exactly what questions you need to ask yourself so that you can develop your own outcome-aligned pricing model if you want to. And I'm also going to give you a success checklist, which will help you, make sure that if you've developed one, that it's actually going to be sustainable and your risk is going to be appropriately managed. So as a starting point, you might be running any kind of pricing model or multiple pricing models in your business. Maybe you've got a market-based pricing model, like your pricing is determined by looking at your competitors, and then you pick a price that you feel just sort of reflects the quality of your service and brand. I've done that many times with courses going, okay, they range from 4,000 to 10,000, and I'm going to pick 9,000 because I actually want the market to see me as a premium offering. I'm confident in what we've got to offer, and I'm going to use competitors or a sort of market-based approach. Maybe you're doing like an hourly cost plus model, where you go, okay, it costs me $130 an hour to have a person complete this service. I'm therefore going to charge $250 an hour or $180 an hour or whatever the margin is that you've added on top. So it's just a margin on top of your cost. Maybe you've got a fixed fee model. So you charge a single set price for your service, regardless of actually how long it takes you or how much usage there is by the customer. Maybe you've got a tiered offering. You've got multiple packages or service levels at different price points. Maybe you're running a retainer model. So you've got like a regular ongoing fee for continuous access to your services over a period. Or you could be doing a subscription model where they're just paying a recurring fee to access a whole suite of services. Or perhaps you've got an outcome-aligned model already where your fees are actually directly tied to the performance or outcomes achieved by your service. Or maybe you've got something else. If you've got something else, let me know what it is. I would love to know. If you weren't thinking, I've got an outcome-aligned pricing model, awesome. That represents an interesting opportunity for you to get creative today and consider some new pricing options for your business. You don't have to commit to it. It's an ideation exercise, but you might just come up with a cracker that really creates a strong platform and a tailwind for you into your next phase of growth. So what is outcome-aligned pricing? Fundamentally, charging fees aligned to the success of the client or the success delivered is the heart of outcome-aligned pricing. First of all, differentiation. It sets you apart like nothing else. And competitors don't usually want to copycat your bold pricing model because they look really samey. Like if you come up with a pricing model that nobody else is doing, or very few people are doing, when they copy it, they just look a little bit, puts them in a bad light in the eyes of customers because you've already come up with that. Second, it can absolutely help accelerate your customer acquisition efforts, obviously, because it reduces risk for your customers and therefore it's going to remove barriers to sales. So we'll talk about that. Margins. Number 3, margins definitely helps you build premium margins because usually you can charge a premium for an outcome aligned model where you're sharing risk with the client or you're taking on more risk because usually you take on very little risk and all the risk is on the client. And for that, they're not going to pay you as much. The last 2, probably number 4, is loyalty. It helps to shift you from supplier to partner in the mind of your customer, because your model aligns with your client's definition of success. Like, you are a partner who's now invested in their achievements. You're not just a supplier who wants money from them and bears no risk for poor service or outcomes. You're a partner and you succeed when they succeed. So it really shifts the relationship from supplier to partner. And finally, referrals. I definitely find outcome-aligned pricing generates more referrals, because when the client's risk is reduced and they therefore respect you more because of the risk that you're willing to take, and you're willing to put some, in inverted commas, balls on the line, some skin in the game, it elevates you above the fray in their mind. And it's the kind of model, therefore, they love telling their peers and their friends about. So that's what it is in general. Let me give you some examples. I'm going to give you 4 examples. The first one, I'll give you 2 where I'm going to name the company and 2 where I'm not going to name the company. Lambda School, or Lambda College, well, it's called Lambda. It's now called Bloom Institute of Technology, but it was called Lambda. They reimagined the whole way career change courses were priced by aligning their tuition with the students' job outcomes. So in every one of these circumstances, like a common couple of themes. One is, what's the customer's real outcome? What does the customer want from them? Well, students going to Lambda School were doing a course to become a web developer, I think it was a web development course. So they could be in some other career or field. Maybe they're an IT administrator. They're going to do a web development course. A software development course. It was not web development, software development. They wanted to get a developer's job. They want the job on the other side. They don't really care about the course. Nobody actually wants to do the course. Their outcome is the thing on the other side of the service, which for these students is a job as a developer. So what's the traditional approach? Well, most competitors would do a market-based pricing approach. They're pretty much going to charge as much as they think the students will pay, like it's going to be $20,000 upfront or $22,000 on a payment plan. No relationship to outcomes, no risk to the provider if you don't get a job, nothing. And so what do customers hate about that? Potential students hated it's all hope that they'll get a job. I'm going to have to put $20,000 in. It might take me a year to do this course, and there's no skin in the game for the provider if I don't get a job. And that's actually what I want. So what was the innovative approach? They built a income share agreement where it was like, you could actually still pay them $20,000 upfront, or you could pay them nothing to start the course and actually do the entire course. But once you completed the course, you'd pay 17% of your salary until $35,000 was paid back, which is almost double the original cost of the course. And if you didn't get a job within 6 months, they would coach you for free until you got a job. So for the company, all of a sudden, they've got some students still paying them upfront 20 grand, some paying them 22 grand on a payment plan. But the students who are saying, hey, I get to do this course for free, and if I don't get a job, I'm going to pay these guys nothing. That's amazing. Or they're going to help me for free until I get a job. That's also amazing. And then if I do get a job, I'm going to pay 17% of that salary. And yes, I'm going to pay $35,000 instead of $20,000, but I'm going to be paying it as a percentage of this increased salary that I'm going to get as my outcome. Now we are tied together for you, the institution, helping me, the student, get my job. Does that make sense? That's an amazing model. And those guys absolutely catapulted to stardom. They got absolutely overwhelmed with student demand. It was huge. Second example for you was a personal example, and this was probably a year and a half ago, was the first time I'd seen it, and it's now become far more common in Australian real estate. And I will call this company out, well done to them, Place Real Estate in Brisbane. I had a house that I was going to sell, and the agent commission model was actually based on customer satisfaction, leading to a kind of win-win. So my outcome was that they run a process that delivers me the maximum possible price for the house that I was selling. And the normal approach is, as many people would be familiar with, the agent's going to charge you, it depends in the state, right? But usually, let's say 2.2% of the sale price, regardless of the sale price they achieve. Now, the issue with that, and what customers hate, including me, is there's no relationship between the fee and the outcome. And $100,000 in total price to me is of actually very little consequence to the agent. Like, they're making most of their commission off the fact that I'm selling a high price property. And it's a small change for them in commission for me to get $100,000 more, but that's a huge change for me. And so there was not a strong relationship between the fee and the outcome. And most customers hate that. So they came up with an innovative approach. This agent said to me, we want you to pay us based on what you think we're worth. We will take anything. Our range is anywhere from 1.5% to 3.5% of the sale price based on your satisfaction. And you choose when we've finished the job. And I thought, that is amazing. Like, of course, if I wanted to be a nasty customer, they could do a great job and I could pay them 1.5%. That's the risk that they take. But equally, they said, we want you to want to pay us 3.5%. We're going to work as hard as we possibly can to delight you in the process and in the outcome. And of course, they don't have total control of the outcome, but they do influence it for sure. And I absolutely love that. Out of interest, I actually ended up paying them 2.9%. I didn't pay them 3.5% because actually the outcome wasn't quite what I wanted, but they did run an excellent process and their service was second to none. So I could have paid 2.2%, which was the average, but I actually paid them 2.9%. So for them, they actually made 30% more for exactly the same amount of work than they would have made otherwise because they were willing to share the risk with me. And I had some choice based on the process. And what happens for the company when they do things like this? They start to edge out their competitors and they're making more than their competitors. These guys could be making almost probably 70% more than their competitors because they're willing to take a little bit of that risk where everybody else just wants to hunker down on the 2.2 because they don't have the courage to put themselves on the line. Okay, I'm not going to name this company, but I know a company that does some amazing work on tender processes in government. And government often, you may be amazed by these stats, but government might often spend $1 million on just having consultants help them build a tender so that they can take that tender out to market. Let's just say they're building a armored tank vehicle or something. And they need wheel nuts for these tanks. The tender, the actual document creation to be able to create all the specifications and all the things that go into this document, it might be 1,000 pages long. They pay consultants maybe $1 million to put that tender together, and it'll probably take them about 6 months. 6 months of maybe like 10 to 14 people's worth of work to put together the document, and that's before the industry has actually responded to the document and said, hey, I've got wheel nuts and they look like this. So the tender development process is a huge cost and very time consuming for the government. These guys this consulting business came up with a really interesting approach and a proprietary approach where they thought they could get the tenders done in half the time and in half the cost. So they said, well, everybody else charges time and materials. And what does a customer, i.e. the government, hate about that? Well, there's a completely perverse incentive, isn't there? If the consultants are being paid in time and materials, their incentive is for it to take longer. And that's the opposite of the incentive. And that's the opposite of what the customer wants as an outcome, which is for the tender to be developed in the fastest possible time so they can free up their people to do other things. And they can get it into the market as quickly as possible so they can get that capability into the government as quickly as possible. So what did they do? They came up with an innovative approach and they said, look, if you use our technology and if we do it in half the time, you'll pay us 50% of the cost, but we'll also split the difference. So you're essentially going to get, if we can get it done in 3 months and $500,000 instead of 6 months and $1 million, you'll pay us the $500,000, but we've just saved you $500,000. So you can split the difference of that with us. So you'll pay us an extra $250K. So you're going to essentially get it at half the speed that you would get it for twice the speed, if you like, half the time that anyone else can do it, but you'll get a 25% discount and we're going to make some upside by sharing that difference with you. So our costs are linked to the 500K, but then we get this little upside. So everybody wins in that model. It's a really interesting model of how to, again, edge out competitors and build something that takes more courage, but also has more upside. Fourth and final example I want to give you is digital marketing. The number of agencies that I've looked at over time, and still so many of them charge a percentage of the advertising spend. I remember in my days at Study Group, we used to have, we would have been spending easily $1 million a month, probably more, maybe a couple of million a month on advertising. Lead generation with different marketing agencies. And the majority of them were getting paid, and this was like a normalized model, the majority were getting paid 20% of what you spent on ads. So if you spent $1 million, they were making $200,000 as their remuneration for what you spent on ads. But what's my outcome as the customer? I want leads that turn into sales. I don't just want more leads. I don't just want volume. I want leads that are quality and they're going to turn to sales. And so there's no relationship between how much I spend and there's no skin in the game for that provider. Like their incentive becomes to have me spend more, and there's no relationship between that and necessarily me getting better quality leads, which is what I want, and I want my cost of acquisition to go down. So I was chatting to another founder recently who had their key marketing agency on one of their channels, which was a Facebook marketing agency primarily. They had a low retainer to cover some of their base costs, but the rest of their remuneration was 5% of revenue. So they are absolutely tied to the outcome. The customer's excited because the agency's got skin in the game and aligned on the outcome. The agency's excited because actually they've got this uncapped upside. If they continue to help generate more revenue, they're going to make more and more money, well exceeding what they would have made on a retainer-based model as just a percentage of spend. Have they got more risk? Absolutely. but are they on the hook for delivering quality? Definitely. So they had a really interesting model of getting this sort of uncapped upside and shared risk with the client based on what does the client want as an outcome. So each of those four cases underscores that power of pricing based on outcomes. Differentiation, because competitors aren't doing, because most competitors lack the courage to back themselves and share risk. Helps with the acquisition because the customer's got a risk reduction, which helps it makes it easier for the customer to get started. The margins per client, if you're good at what you do, the margins per client will go up. The loyalty of your clients will increase. Why? Because you've built this sense of partnership, this different relationship, and you've got a shared risk reward and a win-win model going on. Everybody's incentivized around the same thing. And then finally, you get that referral nature because of the level of differentiation and the respect by the client for your courage in tackling this model. So let me give you the 5 really simple questions you need to ask yourself if you want to develop an outcome-aligned pricing model, or you want to trial one, or you want to sort of do the thinking to come up with one. Question 1, what is the real outcome the customer wants? What do they value the most? What is the real outcome they're after? Question 2, what is the traditional pricing model by the industry? How does everybody else price? There's usually a normalized pricing model that everybody's running. What is that? Third, what do customers hate about that normalized pricing model? What do they hate about the way everybody prices and the traditional way of doing it? Number 4, what's an innovative alternative that takes on more risk for you for greater reward, but where both parties still win? That is the 4th question. And I think it's good to have a little check in here, which is what is the win-win going to be for each party? And I can hear you saying, Sean, that's great, but if I take on more risk, how do I make sure I don't end up, failing, paying out a whole bunch of money, not making as much, our remuneration goes down, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going to give you a checklist, a 7-step success checklist that should help you come up with a better, litmus test, I guess, to make sure that your model is solid. Okay, so item 1 on the checklist, is it outcome focused? So does it align with the value that your customers perceive? And does it feel fair? Do you think it's going to feel fair to your customers for the outcome that's delivered? Second, have you got some success metrics agreed? Like, how are you both going to know what success looks like? Is that clear? Is it quantifiable? Like, how are you going to know if you've achieved the outcome, if that makes sense? And you're both going to agree on that, but you want to have that, done up front. The third is to say, are your qualifiers clear? Like, you may not take on every client into this model, this where you share risk. So you can absolutely say, we don't do this with every client. We do it with clients who have these conditions that are met, and or that the clients agree that they'll do these things. You can absolutely expect things of the customer. If you're going to take on more risk, you can definitely say, hey, you need to do these 6 or 7 things, Mr. Customer, or this deal is not valid. But if you do those things, then we will absolutely back that risk because we know that you'll do the things that we know that you need to do for you to get that outcome based on our skill set. So it helps to reduce the downside risk for you, but be careful about the transparency, which I'll come back to. You've got to retain the honesty in it being performance related. Like, you can't have a million clauses as a get out of jail free card. Otherwise, no one's going to believe it or want it. Number 4, is it feasible and is it scalable? So the question I'm asking you here is not what do you do if it doesn't work? I think you can deal with that with your qualifiers and your conditions. But what if it goes off and everybody wants it? Like, it just goes crazy. Do you have the skills to deliver on that? And how can you scale up sufficiently, especially if you're in your services business, to ensure that you can meet that demand and keep the quality up? I had a friend, I have a friend, and we were chatting about this recently. She's got a digital marketing agency. They implemented a model like this with a really strong sort of guarantee and outcome aligned pricing. And the business doubled from, it was relatively small to start with, doubled from about 1.5 to 3 million really fast, but it struggled to retain the quality. And that became a huge problem for that founder. So they ended up with more revenue, but an absolute nightmare of problems to deal with that took them 6-8 months and resulted in brand damage. So you've got to make sure that you test that. What if it goes really well and we've got to scale up? Don't just assume, I'll deal with that later. How are you going to ensure you can scale up the quality? Number 5, is it going to be profitable? Like, is it actually going to enhance your profitability, not just cover its costs? Otherwise, there's really limited point. Number 6, is it aligned? So I don't mean, is it outcome focused? We've already talked about that. But when you think about the consequences of the incentive, what behavior is it going to drive? Is it going to have both parties striving for the best outcomes with clear rewards for performance that exceeds expectations? Like, is it going to drive behaviorally both people to the right place? You've got to ask that question, because if it's not in alignment in terms of everybody's incentive and that it kind of creates the wrong behaviors, then you're going to have problems with it in the future. It's got to be sustainable from that perspective. And then finally, is it transparent and simple? Like, it needs to be easy to understand for both of you, and it's got to be really clear. So let's assume you've asked the 5 questions and you've come up with a model. You've run it through the 7 success criteria. You've gone through your checklist. You've gone, yep, this is looking pretty good. What about now? How do I implement it? Okay, the most important thing when it comes to implementation is to pilot it. You have to limit it to a small number of customers, like a certain segment, or the first 3 people are going to get access to this, or one person. Like, pilot it, test it, assess it. Don't just open the floodgates. And that will massively help you reduce your risk. It's very easy to go, this looks amazing. We've talked to everybody about it. It's incredible. Customers, we know we've chatted to some customers. They all like it. Let's just put it in. I strongly recommend you don't do that. I strongly recommend that you contain a pilot, be patient, get the testing, get the learnings, get the improvement, iterate it, and then think about opening the floodgates to a larger group of people. Remembering, the goal is not to take on all the risk. The goal is to share the risk intelligently for mutual benefit. Doesn't mean you have to take on all of it. You got to share it, and that way you both win. The other thing to say is that it's not a one-time tactic. Like, it's a strategic sort of evolution. You need to keep iterating so that you stay ahead on this one. So that is outcome-aligned pricing, as simple as I can make it. And I hope that you found that a really valuable exercise. Like, that is, imagine, that's the kind of thinking that if you do that, imagine how many times you can do that on your business. Like, that, the thinking on your pricing is just the beginning of optimizing your business. There's so much that can be done. Like, that one single mental exercise can generate hundreds of thousands or even millions in additional margin and competitive advantage. Imagine applying that level of kind of innovation across all areas of your business. I have, by the way, heaps, that's a quantifiable term, heaps of exercises and frameworks just like this that I leverage with founders that I work with to help them optimize their business. And that's why I love growth mentoring. It's like, you see some huge aha moments, you see some massive shifts in businesses when some of these really simple exercises can generate really significant value. So if you want some help to make sure you can fulfill the potential impact of your business, if you want to build something that's more sellable, or that you can sell like full exit or sell down to management, but ultimately create the retirement you're hoping for, but you're time poor. You don't want to go and do courses and read books and try to figure it all out from podcasts and so on, but you want someone to work it through with you one-to-one. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Chat to me about my growth mentoring service. We can sniff each other out for potential fit. I have very few clients spots available in my roster, but there is an opening at the moment. So if you'd like to chat about it, you can hit me up on LinkedIn or sean@scalehq.com.au. And that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed this session on outcome-aligned pricing, and I will see you in 2 weeks' time. The team here at ScaleHQ hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Now, if you want to achieve scale, but you want to know what's going to hold you back, we can help. Head over to scalehq.com.au/growth score to get your free 9-page growth score report. That's going to help you understand where your top 3 barriers are to scale. And if you'd like, we'll even do a free debrief on the report for you with no obligations or expectations, just lots of value from some CEOs who've scaled to help you on your journey. That's scalehq.com.au/growth score. And find out what's holding you back from fulfilling the potential of your business today.